Well, we finally did it. After all that bickering back and forth, one can have the exact same car as gas, electric, or go fast electric. Big question, what does all this cost? And I don't just mean money. So yes, let's get the obvious question out of the way right at the top. Didn't you and I already drive the new 5 Series? Not once, but twice. Technically, yes. This one, no. Why? Those were electric, this one is not. A recap of the new 5 Series. This is really one of the first platforms from any major car manufacturer that was designed from the outset to be both internal combustion engine as well as electric. So not a completely different platform like Mercedes does with the EQE and the EQS. This was designed from the outset to be one platform that could accept both propulsion systems. And you and I have already driven the two-wheel drive, the rear-wheel drive i5 eDrive 40, and we've driven the all-wheel drive i5 M60. This one is a 4-cylinder. So yes, internal combustion engine. This one can be had as all-wheel drive or rear drive. Now there is going to be a 540, a 6-cylinder. We'll get to that later. What makes this one stand out? Well, obviously the propulsion system and the lack of like a queen-size mattress that sits underneath the vehicle in the form of a battery. It is a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, but most importantly, it is a mild hybrid system. It's not like the Mercedes systems where they have the integrated starter generator motor. It sits between the engine and transmission. BMW, like Land Rover, a bit more pedestrian in that it's not really designed to improve the performance, rather to increase the efficiency while simultaneously adding torque under high load situations. Think stop and go traffic. Now, how does that impact the performance figures? Well, it's the box standard 5 Series, the most basic one can get. It's not an M5. So 0 to 60, 5.9 seconds, and VMAX equally unexciting at 130 miles an hour. What's that old saying? Third time being the charm. Absolutely applies to this case and definitively in the mass department, 4,041 pounds, or depending on expressive weights and measures, 1,833 kilograms. Why is that important? Well, for the all-wheel drive, with this engine, it would be 117 pounds heavier. However, if it was the i5 eDrive 40, meaning the rear-wheel drive electric version, it would be 900 pounds heavier. But wait, there's more. What if it were the i5 M60, the all-wheel drive? 1,200 pounds more with that sport mode. Little bit, very slight delay, but then it's not immediate, but very good delivery power. Spools up 4,000 to 5,000 RPM. That's when it kind of gets away from you. There is something going on here. You and I have driven BMWs with mild hybrids before, but this, I'm going to go down on record as saying this is a line of demarcation for mild hybrid. And I don't mean like the Mercedes AMG system. That is a missile that is designed to be a performance car. This is designed for efficiency, but there's something else going on here. When you and I first drove a mild hybrid, what was it? I think it was a Buick LaCrosse or something like that 14 years ago, 15 years ago. It was for efficiency. It did nothing in the way it delivers power. They've gotten better over the years. This, I wouldn't go so far as to saying this is a 6-cylinder replacement, but this is a buzziness replacement. Anytime you put a 4-cylinder in like an E-Class, a 5 Series, a car bigger than say a Corolla, it has to work harder and it gets really buzzy. You lose the suppleness. BMW tuned their 2-liter 4-cylinder better than others. I would argue it's a better mousetrap, a 4-cylinder and a 5 than an E, and that's over the past like 2 generations. But there's something else going on here. There's more instantaneous torque. I don't feel like the engine is overtaxed. You don't hear it. That's the thing. It's not that it's as powerful as a 6-cylinder. It's not the missile that is an inline 6 in a BMW, but the car, it's transformed. This is really what electrification should be about. And that, of course, brings us to the topic of efficiency. This, not a full hybrid, not exactly lightweight, and definitely not small. So how are we doing driving like a maniac on these roads here, considering the US government calls this for 27 around town? Well, driving as we are this entire day, I did 27 mpg combined. and the one time I did take it on the freeway down to Orange County, I did a total of 39. Okay, so that's all fine and good, but why is this mild hybrid mousetrap even important? Answer, here's a mid-sized luxury car that in terms of efficiency performs like a compact car. So rather than playing a round of our famous game, the options game, let's have a very sobering discussion about the costs of going electric. So this is a rear drive, 4-cylinder, 5 Series. It's the most basic one can get. This is the cheap seats in the land of 5 Series. Basic price, about $57,000 US. So if you're doing the math here, it's about $10,000 to go to a rear drive electric and about $30,000 to go to an all-wheel drive electric. Then we get into really the cost of this car here. It's got about $10,000 in options. It looks very dressed up. As a matter of fact, you're probably thinking I'm playing a game with you because it looks just like the i5 M60 we already drove. So we get to about a $69,000 car. And that's when we get into the real trouble of going electric. You see, most people, they look at it as, hey, I'm going electric and I'm going to save some money on energy. Then there are the early adopters. These people are going electric no matter the cost, no matter the barrier, and much of their logic has applied to other technology in the past. These are the people that pay the high price, pay the R&D tab, and thus it goes down to the masses. And this is where we are now. The early adopters were 13 years ago, buying Volts, buying Leafs. Now we have an opportunity from pretty much every car manufacturer to buy an electric car. So we've crossed the chasm. Great book if you're into business or selling or any kind of stuff. And that's how we arrive at the point we are today, an inflection point in that electric cars need to prove a business case in order to sell to those masses and cross the chasm. So like, for example, 5 years ago when I first put an electric car charger, a level 2 charger at the home, it was about half the cost per kilowatt hour for me to charge it in California. Now it's getting to like 40 cents. I was just in Connecticut charging an electric car and it was 60 cents. Now granted that was level 3, but that's I think the highest I've ever paid for a level 3. And this is where we get to a big point. Anyone selling you on the idea that electric cars are cheaper to run in terms of just the energy, yeah, there's virtually no maintenance, that kind of stuff. There are other things that are more expensive, like the insurance or probably getting parts after an accident. But the reality is the energy, we're at parity. That's what I'm seeing, and as I travel around and drive different electric cars and charge them, and we're going to get to a point in places like California where you're going to get to surge pricing because so many people have these things. And now you're seeing governments around the world saying, wait a minute, we gave all these incentives for people to buy electric cars and we got a deficit on gas tax. So there are a couple states already talking about putting a higher tax on electric cars. So that's where we get into 10 grand delta higher or 30 grand delta higher to get effectively the same car. Now, I understand there is the whole logic of the tailpipe emissions, but this is where we go back to the original, you need to go electric or else. There was this whole mindset of, don't bother me with the facts, my mind is already made up. There was a lot of technology that government regulators around the world completely overlooked because they were fighting a culture war, not trying to lower tailpipe emissions. So let's you and I put aside everything we've discussed thus far and focus on really what's going on here. We've lost between 1,200 and 900 pounds, and it really shows how good the platform is. Here is a vehicle that is now, 3.5 inches longer than the car it replaces, and I don't feel like I'm sliding around these turns here. The brakes, not the performance metallic brakes, but still unusually good stopping power to kind of back up everything this car is doing. In other words, everything comes together to cash the checks of what this is trying to be, a standard serial production BMW, which means it needs to be better than everything else out there in its class. I can't help but feeling that I've become, for lack of a better term, a bit of an accountant throughout this episode, but that is where we are as we look at a platform that can credibly support both propulsion system types. And here it's not really about BMW, Mercedes, or all the manufacturers that have been forced to go electric. It's really about the sea change that we've seen throughout the past year or so. You look at the landscape in Europe in particular, there's been a lot of political change, whether you agree with it or not. This is what I like to classify as classic overcorrections. It was electric or else. That was the overcorrection many years ago. Now you're getting an overcorrection that will probably roll back those mandates starting in Europe, and depending on what happens here in the US, we'll probably see more of it. And no, this isn't a presidential election thing, this is a reality thing. Reality is stepping in and saying, perhaps we're not really ready for this yet. We need to look at other technologies that can take 900 pounds out of the car and make it a driving machine that people actually want to buy. And maybe we get to a point where we lower insurance. Maybe we have tires for electric cars that are cheaper. Okay, that's all fine and good, but what am I trying to say here? This was never just about electrifying cars. This was a question of how do we agree and move forward as a community, and the classic overcorrection many years ago was focusing on just one solution to the exclusion of everything else. So the wish list ask here is not for the car manufacturer, it's for you. It's for the person that goes into the voting booth. Don't just think about one item, because most people, they vote on one issue. You need to think about 3, 4, 5 issues down the road, because that's the reality of voting today. You need to understand how to play chess with different political and really cultural issues, because that's what's happened here. Classic overcorrection, because we've had the wrong people fighting a culture war. You can agree or disagree with me, but at the end of the day, this still applies. Science, real science, not science trademark, of lower mass creates more efficiency while we work on other technologies that may or may not work in all regions of the world. Remember, one size does not fit all. And this is the point of the episode that I get off my soapbox and I turn the episode around to you guys to opine in the comments below. What am I looking for? A respectful discussion, disagreement, whatever you want to call it. No name calling, none of this bullshit ists or isms. I want to have a good discussion between you guys, amongst all of us, because at this point, no more overcorrections. We don't have much more space left for overcorrections. And with that, if you found this discussion fascinating, I would highly suggest you watch our members only playlist, where I have these discussions and more with many people in the industry. You can see that playlist here. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.